Good morning, everybody. My name is EVA.
I'm Miguel.
And I'm Renee, and we're your hosts. Welcome to Signals in the Noise, daily insights into trends in Florida's narrative landscape.
Signals in the Noise takes a look at news articles, social media content, and other platforms to identify conversations, messages, and stories that reinforce ideas, beliefs, and values that we interact with every day.
This allows us to identify the shape and color of how meaning is made in the landscape in which we're all organizing and communicating. This is what we call monitoring the narrative weather, and we are your resident meteorologists tracking everything.
Each morning, we'll take you through the latest, where we cover stories of importance. Then we'll move to Hot Takes, where we'll look at viral content, and we'll wrap things up with On the Radar, a segment where we talk about real-time stories that we're tracking. Let's get right into our first segment, The Latest. Ahead of the first day of early in-person voting in Florida, several hundred supporters of Donald Trump gathered on the lawn in 10 Miami Park Sunday afternoon before leading a massive caravan that lasted into the evening throughout West Miami-Dade and parts of downtown Miami. On the other side of town, a pro-Biden caravan calling themselves the Blue Tsunami showed up and showed out at Doral Central Park. It looks like Floridians have perfected their COVID caravans.
I'm getting pretty much a Battle of the Caravan vibes here.
Ooh, that's a good one.
On Instagram, Cubanos for Biden produced popular content on the elections in Florida across the platform. And you know what? This photo gives me a lot of inspiration. Can you imagine the hashtag like chanclas for president, where it's a bunch of abuelas and tias, and they can debate over in the morning having cafecitos or go viral with their protest signs? Like, I can see it now. Also, Latinos for Trump's anti-socialism caravan in Miami this weekend was also among the popular content on the platform. Images with protests and videos showing the size of the caravans are popular in general and are rewarded by Instagram's algorithm. The top hashtags on Twitter and Facebook are hashtag Florida for Biden, hashtag Latinos for Trump, and hashtag Florida, the latter of which features conversations both locally and nationally about the state's first day of early in-person voting.
Speaking of, did you catch the head of Latinos for Trump, who's also the chairman of the Proud Boys, in case you missed it, make his cameo at one of the pro-Biden caravans this weekend? Conversations under Sofia Hidalgo's now viral tweet thread discusses voter intimidation and the real concern that the Proud Boys and other pro-Trump groups will continue to threaten anyone they deem as their opposition as early voting kicks off. Notice his shirt.
Wow. Well, I'm happy to say that if the pictures of long lines and torrential rain indicate anything, it's that those threats are not enough to stop voters' momentum to cast their ballots.
Y'all, it would not be the first day of in-person voting without a few hiccups, though. One county had to close voting site after the election supervisor and an employee tested positive for the coronavirus, while Orange County's election website went down early in the morning.
Ugh, yikes. I guess when one goes, the rest follows, huh?
Yeah.
Well, Florida Republicans say that this is their time to shine, believing any advantage Biden gets will be swamped by Trump supporters casting in-person ballots. There's almost 500,000 more high-propensity voters in the state that are registered as Republican, and the GOP believes all concerns of the Democrats' mail-in voting advantage will go out the window once Trump gains the win, whether it's by a landslide or by a couple thousand votes.
Also, stories on early voting highlight the state's announcement that they will push returning citizens with felony convictions from voter rolls if they have outstanding court debts. This can be seen as a last-minute move to disenfranchise the formerly incarcerated and as a form of voter suppression. This move goes against the majority of Floridians who casted their vote in favor of Amendment 4 back in 2018. This comes weeks after successful attacks on Mike Bloomberg stopped his proposal to pay off court fees so that returning citizens could register to vote without interruption. The timing of this could not be worse, though. Even libertarians who typically side with conservative politics are calling this, quote, the sign of a party that does not deserve to exist, unquote. Ouch.
Ouch indeed.
With that, let's move on to our next segment, Hot Takes.
push for a $15 minimum wage was popular in Florida, and then COVID happened. If you can, try and remember the beginning of the pandemic. We saw conversations that challenged the concept of our pre-pandemic notions of what American labor should look like, and the dismantling of the idea that low-wage workers are disposable. Healthcare workers and workers in the service industry began to be called essential employees and were celebrated as everyday heroes. Some of us even banged our pots and pans together to celebrate them from the safety of our home for months.
Well, now Florida voters will now be able to decide whether the price we place on hourly work should change across the state with Amendment 2. With the yes vote, the incremental increase of wages could drastically reduce the number of households living in poverty and narrow the pay gaps that are experienced by women and people of color. Opponents of Amendment 2 argue it could slow Florida's economic growth, one that has already been slowed down by the pandemic.
The DNC platform has committed to raising the federal minimum wage to $15 and building a nation with newly empowered unions, citing it isn't enough just to praise essential workers, but that they also need to be paid fairly for their hard work and sacrifice during the pandemic. The Palm Beach Post, in a top-performing Facebook post on the topic, endorsed Amendment 2. In another top-performing post, Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith voices his support for the passage of the amendment, calling the current minimum wage in Florida a starvation wage that keeps working families in poverty. Floridians, regardless of the type of job they have or the income bracket they fall in, are deserving of dignity and respect. And this underlying belief can be seen among the top-performing posts about raising the minimum wage in Florida.
Yeah, Miguel, that's so true. So many workers are just one unexpected expense away from financial collapse or worse.
Absolutely.
Yes, and on TikTok, the hashtag living wage holds some viral content by users highlighting facts about how a minimum wage impacts families' ability to do simple things like pay rent, put food on the table, and it uplifts the idea that it's hypocritical for Christians to punch down on others for the type of work that they do. These are both popular and accessible talking points that resonate with millennials and Gen Z voters of all races and creed. Other conversations about Amendment 2 center tax-paying Floridians having to foot the bill for safety net programs. This is a talking point held by those who call themselves fiscal conservatives.
Now, over on Facebook, Representative Anna Eskamani's reshare of Fox 35 Orlando story on Amendment 2 is a big piece of popular content. Some of the underlying ideas and beliefs in the 200-plus comments include voting no because it will hurt small businesses, voting yes because everyone needs a livable wage, as well as progressive sentiments on the need for universal basic income and bootstraps ideology and anti-socialist trolling. Now, over on Reddit, we found conversations on constitutional amendments happening mostly on the Vote Dem, that's DEM, Florida and Jacksonville subreddits, respectively. This emphasizes the fact that people are talking to one another about constitutional amendments to make up for an information gap. Content that shows how to vote for this year's amendments are held primarily by the news media, but it features mostly their editorial board's opinion for each amendment, which can vary from paper to paper. Some Redditors say that they would much rather see stories on the proposed constitutional amendments and their intentions, ramifications, or side effects, and less about which way to vote for them.
And stories and conversations on Amendment 3 have flown mostly under the radar. Amendment 3 would create a top 2 open primary system that would list all qualified candidates on the primary ballot and allow all registered Florida voters, including those without a party affiliation, to choose. Currently, Florida's primaries disenfranchises independent voters, a growing segment of Florida's voter bloc. Influencers like Magic Johnson have endorsed Amendment 3, naming it an opportunity to let all voters vote and ensure that politicians will listen to every voter, not just those registered under their party. The Republican Party of Florida are staunch opponents of Amendment 3, which underlines just how much its passage could challenge their decades-long standing and control of the state's political landscape.
One conversation on Amendment 4 is particularly interesting. The subreddit Florida Trees asks voters to vote no on Amendment 4 and ties it to giving corporate cannabis more time to influence the process of legalizing marijuana in the state, with the notion that recreational use will likely be on the ballot in 2022. Other stories and conversations on Amendment 4 are about the dark money groups that back this particular amendment. With the passing of Amendment 4, it could crush the role Florida voters have on direct democracy.
Mm-hmm. And we didn't find too much chatter on Amendment 1, but a conversation in the Florida subreddit highlights some of the confusion behind why Amendment 1 even exists. The proposed amendment relies heavily on a dog whistle that uplifts the false claim that there is rampant voter fraud by undocumented people in Florida. This is disinformation in action. Whew. I hope everyone took their notes on all of these ballot initiatives. Now let's move on into our last segment, On the Radar.
A previously circulated photo of Joe Biden kneeling at the Little Haiti Cultural Center went viral again. We are on the lookout for political trolls and other nefarious actors moving disinformation on right-wing Latinx Facebook, who will likely recycle some of the same false claims that we told you about previously, that Biden is a president that will submit to foreign leaders.
Also, Cubanos por el Mundo host Alex Otaola, who is known as one of the organizers behind some of the pro-Trump caravans in Florida, published a brief interview with Trump in a clip that is being used by other right-leaning accounts to expose members of the Venezuelan American community who have been critical of Trump. It currently has over 120,000 views on YouTube.
Oof.
Some of the posts call for the deportation of those critics who were mentioned, despite the fact that some of them are actually naturalized American citizens. While this raises security concerns, we'll be monitoring the conversation on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter since the original content has since been removed.
Yep. And one of the top news articles surrounding the election in Florida is about a Central Florida company, Daniels Manufacturing Corporation, threatening to lay off their employees if Biden wins the election, citing that Democrats' cuts on military spending would affect their profits.
Wait, hold on. That's clearly voter intimidation.
It's definitely voter intimidation and voter manipulation. And we'll be monitoring Twitter and Reddit to see how folks are talking about it and to see if it develops into a bigger story.
You know, Renee, I heard that employees are too afraid to even talk to the media about this story for fear of being fired. And one who did chose to leave the company preemptively because he was offended.
Yes, and campaign finance records show that the company president, George Daniels, has contributed over $600,000 to Trump and other Republicans this election cycle.
Whew, that is a major story that we will definitely keep tracking. And in the meantime, everybody keep an eye out for both the Trump and Biden campaigns who are making stops in Florida this week, maybe even in a city near you. Okay, but wait, before we go though, did y'all hear about 50 Cent?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, if you haven't, this is yet another celebrity endorsing Donald Trump, but this time his reasoning has to do with tax plans. It may convince some Black men that, you know, maybe if you're still undecided or you're voting for Kanye, that you could vote for Trump instead, especially after Ice Cube and now 50 Cent. Well, that's it for us this morning.
Way to end it, EBA.
Just had to sprinkle that little nugget in there, you know, just before we left. Well, that's it for us this morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Signals in the Noise. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
See you, everybody.